Lovely to have you here with us in London for the premiere of Reawakening. Maybe you could just begin with a brief introduction to the film. For people who don't know anything about it, what can they expect?
Reawakening is a psychological thriller. It centres around sort of a middle-aged couple, John and Mary, played by the amazing Jared Harris and Juliet Stevenson. And for 10 years, they've lived in this sort of agonising limbo of grief and uncertainty, because 10 years ago, their 14-year-old daughter ran away from home. No trace of her was ever found. Anyway, after a 10-year anniversary appeal, John comes home from work one day and his wife rushes out to meet him and says she's come home. His wife believes that this is their daughter returned to them, and the husband does not. And the story begins from there.
And it's such a meticulously crafted film. Your second feature, here, writing, directing, but also producing.
Yeah.
And I believe it sort of came to you almost in a bit of a fever dream. So tell us a bit about the genesis of the project and seeing it from, that first moment, that image that maybe you had in your head through to execution.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, each story comes in its own way. And, if I could figure out how ideas came, I'd be a multimillionaire. But I had the idea a very long time ago, but it was just a premise of, a missing daughter or a long-lost child returns home and the parents have very different reactions. It's sort of no more than that. So I put it in a drawer, got busy with other things, and then many years later, my life changed hugely. My mother died, I became a mother, a lot of things sort of happened in my life. And then lockdown happened, and probably in an attempt to avoid homeschooling my then 4-year-old, I sat down and this story just came back to me, and it just sort of came out very, very quickly. I guess my life had changed enough and I'd had enough experiences that it was something I was ready to write. So.
And the feel of it, I guess if you sort of look specifically at the synopsis, you might call it kind of an intimate family drama, but watching it is much more akin to a thriller, the absolute, knife-edge tension throughout, the soundtrack. How did you want it to look and feel?
Well, I always pitched it initially as this is a film about grief masquerading as a thriller. So it very much does have the structure of a thriller. There is a big engine to the plot. There is a mystery. Is this daughter real or isn't she? If she isn't, what's her agenda? What does she want? And if she is, what secrets is the father hiding that makes him react so strongly against her? So there is very much the motor of a thriller, but what's wonderful about that is that the story then enables us to dig much deeper into much bigger themes. So I hope it's both entertaining and not preachy in any way, but it does allow for, I think, a much more profound exploration of very complicated and messy psychologies, and it's a theme I think we can all relate to, because all of us, if we haven't already, will at some point experience a loss. So I think there's fodder in there for everybody to enjoy, I suppose would be the word, because actually, ultimately, for all that it's got big themes and on the surface quite strong subject matter, it's ultimately a very hopeful film.
And what a cast you put together, and Jared and Juliet and Erin. Again, on the face of it, particularly this couple that we first encounter, very ordinary people, but there is so much going on in the complexity of these characters and the different layers. How did you assemble this cast, and what was it like working with them?
Look, when you start thinking about a movie, you have your absolute sort of wish list, your casting list, that everybody just sort of laughs at. But in this instance, I think the gods of film were really smiling on us, because every single one of them came true. I mean, I could not have asked for a more superb threesome trio to come and elevate this movie, and I think their outstanding performances just speak for themselves in the film. What was it like to work with them? It was an absolute bloody joy. Am I allowed to swear? Because I just have. I mean, these are people at the absolute top of their game. I mean, also they are some of our great actors. Juliet, Jared, Erin is a rising star. They bring such psychological insight and thought and intelligence, and what can you say? You're working with people who are also incredibly committed to being as truthful as possible. So, it was a pleasure, and any time if they'd be willing.
As we said, when you watch it, I mean, you're just on the edge of your seat. at every turn. You know, was there that tension also on set? Were you able to kind of, you know, sort of have a bit of respite and have a bit of a laugh in between? I don't know.
It was actually, I mean, I think the paradox is, and a lot of filmmakers will say this, that actually the sort of the more intense and kind of tension-filled and suspenseful the shoot, the more joyful the sort of the surrounds are. We had a fantastic time. You know, we would take time every day, carve out space to just not even rehearse, but play, talk through the scene, get it on its legs. And then the shooting actually could move quite swiftly because everybody felt, you know, they knew what the scene was about. We had a great time. We had a lot of laughs. It was very intense. You know, we shot it in 23 days. There was a COVID situation to deal with. We also shot in the summer of 22 with the heat wave. So, you know, there was a lot going on. But it was, for me, an absolutely joyful experience. I mean, the actors may say differently, but we had a lot of laughs in amongst the tension. Yeah.
And in terms of sort of the residue that a film like this can leave, I think it's definitely one of those that you sort of, you know, it's lingering on in your mind afterwards, and maybe you're sat around the dinner table talking about it, or you're trying to kind of like process it after you've watched it. And there is, I think there's parallels been drawn to Anatomy of a Fall. Is truth something that we choose to believe? You know, how we do process grief, what it does to a person, to a couple, to a family, to have to go through this situation. So what do you expect people will be coming out of the cinema thinking or feeling?
Gosh, well, thank you. First of all, I'm very gratified that you think it's a lingering film. I hope so. That's the intention. I think, as with all movies that are looking at complex human issues, there are no right or wrong answers. And I think ultimately you're looking at people who have to deal with a totally changed landscape of life, and all of us face that very differently. But as I say, ultimately I find it a very hopeful film, because I think the leap of faith that we all take, the strength that we have to display in the face of great loss, and the sense of honouring those that we have lost by loving again, I hope those are things that people will be able to think about after going home.
And very quickly, do you know what you're going to work on next? Have you got another project sort of simmering yet?
I do indeed. I've got a couple of projects. One that we hope to shoot next year called Sweetheart, which is another psychological thriller. A fantastic adaptation of a novel called Light of the Desert, and a really nasty, meaty, fabulous horror called The Healing Oath, which I've written. So hopefully watch this space.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, and huge congratulations on the film. It's definitely one that really stayed with me. So thank you so much. Cheers.